Hi, everyone. Welcome to AccessWorks. This is a CBC initiative to illuminate the industry's work with disabled producers and creators and increase our collective efforts to make content accessible. As far as I know, this is the first free professional development session focusing on content creation and disability, and we really appreciate that you made time to join us today. I am coming to you from Toronto, the unceded and traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. You may or may not know that 27% of Canadians, or 8 million people, identify as having a disability, according to StatsCan. That's roughly 1 in 4 of our audiences. This also means that roughly 1 in 4 of the creators and producers we work with have disabilities. It is so essential that CBC develop and commission shows that feature disabilities, both visible and invisible. Some we have participated in are You Can Ask That with our partner AMI, which is in its 3rd season and features interviews on labels and stereotypes faced by people with disabilities. Love Lamo, a digital short love letter from an autistic man to his late mother, which was funded through the pilot seasons of Access CBC. And You're My Hero, a comedy about a 20-year-old man with cerebral palsy. And we are so lucky to have the creators of that show here to talk to us about their experience of making that show. We're also very happy to announce the release of a new docuseries produced through our Access CBC program, For Our Attention, which explores the stories of adults after receiving a late diagnosis of ADHD. Each episode reveals personal stories of resilience, growth, and strategies that will help people thrive, and thrive. Details of where to watch and a link to the series will be added in the takeaway document. For today's session, we have live closed captioning as well as ASL interpretation. We have a full agenda, so if you pose any questions in the chat, we'll try to answer them in the takeaway document, which will circulate after the session. Our hope is to provide you with some useful learning that you can use right away. We've kept each segment short so you can get a taste of a wide array of topics, which are sessions on what audiences want, how to make your shows more accessible, including through the use of AI, programs and tools offered by our partners at Disability Screen Office, National Screen Institute, and Accessible Media Inc., and programs and learning CBC has to offer, such as Access CBC and from our employee research group, Abilicrew. With that background, we always like to start with audiences and what they want and need. So I'll turn things over to Jenny Meadows, our Senior Analyst for Strategic and Competitive Analysis, and Boris Tia, Accessibility Lead, People and Culture, who will talk about what our disabled audiences and creators are telling us.
Super. Thank you so much, Sally. Okay, I'll just wait for my slides to get started here. Super. Thanks so much. So let's talk about what our audiences are telling us and learn from some of our research here. So as Sally mentioned, when we look at Statistics Canada data, it kind of grounds us in the broader context of disability in Canada. So we know that 1 in 4 people are reporting to have a disability. And what's more is that since 2017 up to 2022, it's grown to 5 percentage points, highlighting a significant increase in the number of Canadians identifying as having a disability. So why is this important for those of us working in media and consuming media? Well, media has an immense power to shape perceptions, foster understanding, and drive inclusion. By recognizing this growing number of Canadians living with a disability, we can ensure that the content we create and share not only reflects the diversity, but also meets the needs of the accessibility needs of this significant audience. Next slide, please. Super. So let's start with some data that comes from the Media Technology Monitor, the MTM. It's a product of CBC Radio Canada and is one of the largest surveys on media and tech in Canada. We've spoken to nearly 300,000 Canadians over the past 2 decades, and this data is from our 2024, fall 2024 data. Next slide, please. So looking at the media devices here, cell phones, tablets, and computers, you'll notice that ownership is high for all three among Canadians. And we do see that ownership is also quite high among persons living with a disability. So the bars on the left is cell phones. So 95% of Canadians have a cell phone. 89% of persons living with a disability have a cell phone as well. Close to 60% for both groups own a tablet. And when we look at computers, who's owning computers in the home, 88% of Canadians have a computer and 88, sorry, and then 83% of persons living with a disability have a computer in the home. And we know they're connected as well. So internet connections are extremely high, with 90% of persons living with a disability having an internet connection at home, and 94% of Canadians. So we know that this connectability is very accessible. And when it comes to more traditional devices, such as TV sets, we can see here that they're nearly ubiquitous in Canadian homes, with higher ownership percentage among Canadians living with a disability. You can see 88% of Canadians owning a TV set in the home and 92% of persons with a disability having a TV set in the home. In terms of ways that Canadians receive their TV service at home, TV subscriptions like fiber optic, cable, and satellite are more common in homes of disabled Canadians, 68% versus 62%. Looking next at the digital side of video, we see subscription video on demand services. People with disabilities are just as likely to be digital viewers and slightly more likely to subscribe to subscription video on demand services such as Crave, Disney Plus, and Club Illico among francophones. From these slides, we notice that disabled audiences, they're just as present, whether it's on TV or on online video services than the average Canadian population. Another really important thing to note is the fact that people with disabilities are spending much more time than the average Canadian watching online video. Now, this could be on Netflix, this could be on YouTube, a variety of different online sources, but they're spending 4 hours more in a typical week than the average Canadian. So we know that they're connected, and we know that they are spending an immense amount of time consuming video online. So let's look at the next slide, understanding some of our audiences from the MTM as well as our MVPS survey. Let's explore how media connects with Canadians living with disabilities. And in this section, we'll look at 3 key aspects. Representation. How important is authentic portrayal of disabilities in media content? Interest. How much appeal is there for a channel dedicated to disability-focused content? And accessibility. How are these features being used in media consumption? These insights will help us hopefully understand the expectations and needs of this audience, guiding efforts to create more inclusive and impactful content. So let's focus on the importance of authentic representation of disabilities in the media content consumed by disabled Canadians. According to our latest data, over half, 52% of disabled Canadians feel that it's important their disability is authentically represented, with 28% stating it's very important and 24% finding it somewhat important. This highlights while not everyone prioritizes representation, there is a clear majority who value seeing their experiences reflected authentically in media. It underscores an opportunity for content creators to ensure inclusivity and accuracy in their portrayals of disabilities. Next slide, please. Oh, no, this is the right one. No, you were right. Now let's take a look at the interest in channel dedicated to people with disabilities. Our data reveals that nearly 3 in 5 disabled Canadians, so 56%, express interest in a channel that focuses on disability-related content. Specifically, 18% are very interested and 38% are somewhat interested. This indicates a strong potential demand for specialized content, showing a significant portion of the community would welcome programming that's tailored to their experiences, challenges, and stories. Next slide, please. This data is from our Mission and Visions Perception Survey, so MVPS. And this is looking at how we examine the use of accessibility features in media content. In the past month, 37% of people with a disability reported using closed captioning compared to 34% of Anglophones overall, showing its broad appeal and utility. For described video, usage was the same among both groups, with 10% utilizing this feature. When it comes to audio transcripts, 7% of disabled Canadians use them, slightly less than the 9% of Anglophones in general. Lastly, sign language interpretation saw usage by 2% of disabled users and 6% of non-disabled individuals reporting use. These insights highlight the varying levels of adoption of accessibility features and point to the potential areas for increased awareness or improvements in accessibility tools for media content. Now I'd like to pass along the presentation to CBC Radio Canada's accessibility lead, Boris Tia.
Thank you, Jenny, for your insights and for highlighting the critical role digital platform play for people with disability. I think it set the stage perfectly for what I was about to share regarding our efforts. I think if we look at what we've done in terms of accessibility and what we're doing right now, you can tell that at CBC Radio Canada, we believe that accessibility is just not a feature, but it's a commitment to inclusions and representations of people with disability. Let me give you a few specific examples on how we are trying to enhancing our digital accessibility and how in our content we amplify the voices of people with disability. So accessibility in our content, let's talk about Olympic and Paralympic Games during the last summer game in Paris last summer. Two things for people with hearing loss disability, we have sign language interpretations, ASL in English and LSQ in French for both opening and closing ceremony, as well as the daily recaps. And for people with visual disability, we have live described video on the opening and the closing ceremony for sure. So we are very proud because this is one of our most accessible Olympic game coverage that we have. Now, on another topic, podcast, we also offer a lot of transcript for a growing number of our podcasts. If we jump to the other slide, in terms of representation in our content, like I said before, accessibility it is just a technical goal. It's about ensuring that everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. So we're trying to give a voice to people with disability. We have a short film called The Voice in Their Hands. It's the production in collaboration with CBC Ottawa Creator Networks. We're trying to celebrate the beauty and diversity of sign language. We also have, for kids, a series that we call Hop, about the frogs with one leg shorter than the other ones. So this is what we're trying to do in terms of our content. So our works doesn't stop here. There's a lot of work that still lies ahead. Innovation is critical to ensure that accessibility keep evolving. So on that note, I'm happy to introduce my colleagues, Steve Johnson and Christine Boyd, who will talk about how they use artificial intelligence to generate automated caption. Steve, Christine, over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Steve Johnston. I am the senior producer for streaming and platforms for CBC Sports. We're going to talk a little bit about enhancing accessibility and using generative AI for real-time closed captioning at the Olympic Games Paris 2024, and for the Paralympic Games.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Boyd, and I work with the CBC's Transformation Office, including on several projects to boost the accessibility of CBC content. So that's to meet our commitments in the CBC's National Accessibility Plan. So I joined Steve and the rest of the CBC team on this experiment we're sharing with you today. Audrey, can you flip to the next slide, please? Thank you. So you can see from the agenda, we're going to outline some of the obstacles, some of the opportunities we found. We'll tell you how we ran the experiment. Then we're going to take you behind the scenes to share some of the biggest challenges, and there were a few. Then we'll let you in on our scorecard, how we did. And finally, Steve here will share the big picture, what we learned and what comes next.
Thanks, Christine. As we said, obstacles and opportunities. Well, providing accessible content for Canadians is one of our core pillars at CBC Sports, and we've been dedicated to exploring new tools and workflows to accomplish this. As Boris mentioned earlier, we provided ASL interpretation for digital streams of the opening and closing ceremonies, as well as for daily video updates produced throughout the Paris Games. Now, for previous games, and in this case, I'm speaking about the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics and the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, we employed a captioning service operated by standard issue human beings. We had the capacity to apply this service to one event per day, forcing us to be judicious about what digital streams we chose. Now, the rationale behind this selection process was to handpick a single daily event with an eye on public interest, while also attempting to provide a diverse array of sports. For the Paris Olympics, we were presented with an opportunity to make use of a new AI-powered captioning tool that could be allocated to one of our streaming encoders, allowing us to go from one event per day to up to 4. Now, not to get too into the weeds, but during Olympics, English services of CBC makes use of 14 encoders to stream as many Olympic events as possible, which can be as many as 50 per day. Now, one encoder represents a single access point to the internet, which would mean we could do multiple events per day in this workflow, but no concurrent events, just one at a time. Now, while picking an assortment of streamed events was good for an audience with an assortment of tastes, it also made sense to have a wide array of sports to put the captioning system through its paces. Auto captioning is not a very new technology, but the issue that sports faces, capital S and lowercase s sports, besides the fast-paced live aspect of it, is the Olympics isn't about the so-called Big Five sports. I mean, they're in there, but these are more niche events with particular terms of vocabulary for each. Track and field alone is tricky enough. Now, fortunately, the Olympics features some early preliminary events that take place before the opening ceremony. And these early soccer and rugby matches provided a great opportunity to kick the tires on lower stakes streams of limited interest until we could satisfy ourselves that it would be a good user experience. In total, across 31 days of the Olympics and Paralympics, we captioned 74 digital streams for almost 226 hours of streamed events, including beach volleyball, para-athletics, swimming, equestrianism, wrestling, BMX, gymnastics, and rugby. And my colleague, the knowledgeable and multi-talented, multi-hyphenate Christine Boyd, will explain how it went.
Thank you, Steve. So to get into the nitty-gritty, we did this experiment with a live automated captioning tool that uses generative AI, or Gen AI for those in the know. So anytime we use Gen AI at the CBC, we feel it's really important to have human oversight and safeguards. And that's because any automated system can make mistakes, but Gen AI has been known to just make things up. So our first safeguard was advanced testing, like Steve mentioned, on low profile or lower profile, low risk events. Second, we knew one of the biggest challenges is always proper names. And the Olympics and the Paralympics pose an Olympian-sized challenge. So no other event has such a wide variety of names or as many. So we decided we'd go the extra mile or kilometer because we're Canadian after all. So for every event captioned, we gave the captioning tool lists of spelling of all athletes' names and when possible pronunciations. And we made these custom dictionaries for about 92% of captioned Olympic events and all but 3 of the Paralympic ones. I know, thank you. Our third safeguard was spot checks. So we deployed 2 intrepid spot checkers. I was one of them. And we randomly tuned in to a 10-minute chunk of about 20 different events and checked the spelling of every single athlete's name. Our fourth safeguard, well, we had a clear disclaimer for the public, post it with the captioning, disclosing that we used AI. We also kept a very close eye on feedback from you, the audience. And our final safeguard, once the games were over, we did rigorous testing on the overall quality of the captioning. All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how'd it go? Well, I'm not going to lie. There were some scheduling and technical glitches. For example, once or twice, we sent the captioning tool the feed from the wrong microphone. Oops, or the wrong event entirely. But that kind of confusion could happen with humans too, but a human captioner might catch the mistake quicker. A much bigger challenge was ambient sound. We noticed that sometimes when our commentators paused, the captioning tool picked up words from the venue, pardon me, from the venue announcers or from the crowd. So again, this seems like a challenge more easily detected by humans. And then the biggest challenge, the misspelled names. We noticed the captioning tool sometimes struggled with names that really closely sounded like other words, like you can see on this slide. For example, there was an Israeli soccer player whose family name was Madmon, Madmon, but the tool transcribed it as madman, as in mental illness. Diamande became diamond, like the precious gem. Chameleon became chameleon. And the Spanish name Gil was transcribed as heal, like health, heal, like foot, and heal, like he will. Another challenge around name order, when Spain played China in the women's basketball, the captioning tool made a lot more errors with the Chinese names. For example, the Chinese basketball star Yuru Li, who you see in this slide, shown here leaping for the ball, she was listed in our custom dictionary as though her given name was Yuru and her surname Li. But the commentators kept calling her by the surname Yuru, and it turned out we had it backwards. In China, Japan, and some other Asian countries, as you may know, the family name is usually written first, followed by a given name. So that was our error, not the tools. And it could have as easily, confused a human. But it was another lesson learned that might change how we instruct a similar tool in the future. So next slide, what were the results? Thank you. Well, as Steve said, we quadrupled the number of live events that we were able to offer with this automated captioning in the last
I think I've frozen up. I can't hear anything, but I'm just going to soldier on in.
Oh, have we lost audio?
I can hear you now.
Where did you lose me, Steve?
A little while ago, I heard somebody say jump in, but are you still, if you're still mid-presentation, please let me wait.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we quadrupled the numbers of caption live streams to 74. The captioning tool was twice as fast, getting results on screen. So we've had past feedback complaining lag time can be an issue in live programming. The average lag time with human captioning is about 6 seconds. And the captioning tool's lag time was half that, so 3 seconds. Another huge win was quality. Both the company behind the captioning tool and the CBC conducted detailed testing to score the accuracy. So we used a model called NER, which scores out of 100, and it emphasizes meaning. So it weighs errors based on how they affect comprehension. Closed captioning for live programming on TV has to meet or beat an NER score of 98 out of 100. So even though we don't have to meet the same standards for web live streams, at least not yet, we aim for the same. We tested 6 transcripts, and 5 out of 6 surpassed that 98 threshold. The only one that didn't scored 97.3. So our tester was amazed. She's been doing this a long time. She said the accuracy of the automated results was light years ahead of what she'd see a few years ago. And a final measure of how we did, and that was from you, dear audience, we had 0, you heard me, 0 complaints about the quality of the transcripts. In fact, it was the opposite. We only had feedback that you wanted more.
All right, conclusions and takeaways. I'm going to speed up a little bit so we can make up some time. We consider this approach to be a success, And the plan had at least been implied that if things worked well, we would consider exploring a wider rollout of the technology. However, there's something of a twist ending to this story. We have now been flooded with a number of other options when it comes to AI captions. There's an IP-based virtual captioning tool that we expect to be testing this year, along with a new tool built into our content management system, as well as rumblings from this year's CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, of new video players with onboard multi-language auto captioning that aren't even cloud-based. Along all steps of the creative process, from production to delivery, our toolkit grows. That means that content can arrive for distribution already captioned before it's sent out to the world, and provides early hints that video players in general will be able to handle captioning with industry-level reliability. With deepest appreciation to our captioner colleagues who toil away at providing accurate captions and reliable text to accompany live events, I love the idea of having captioning be a steady stream of metadata that we can turn on or off like a tap. Because nobody is rooting for AI to come with ways to take over human jobs, but if there's a need not being met because of a lack of capacity, work otherwise not being done, this is where technology can score big wins. It is also exciting to see the rapid progression in the reliability and versatility of automated captioning tools. In just a few short years, the progress is impressive. And as an added bonus, we have the chance to enrich the wider broadcasting community by providing hours of content for captioning language models and continue to elevate the state of the art. And with wins for our audience experience, advancements in our tech infrastructure, and possibly for industry as a whole, this is an accessibility hat trick that we look forward to pursuing again for the Milano Cortina Games in 2026 and beyond. Pause for effect. And now, without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Alethea from the Disability Screen Office.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was wonderful. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alethea Bako-George. I am the Director of Programs and Development at the Disability Screen Office. I am a white disabled woman in her late 20s with dark, curly, short brown hair, and I'm wearing a red sweater today. I recognize that not all of you may know what the Disability Screen Office is because we are a relatively new organization. Back in 2021, confronted with the challenges that the disability community was facing in our Canadian screen industry, Accessible Media Inc., who I know is also here today, brought together creators, writers, directors, and performers for a series of roundtable discussions. Their goal was to identify the barriers preventing equal access and authentic representation in the screen industry and propose solutions to improve accessibility. So it quickly became clear that no single policy or program could solve all of the problems. So an idea began taking shape. What if there was an organization that was dedicated to breaking down those barriers and amplifying the voices of Canadians with disabilities in the screen industry? Officially announced in April of 2022, the Disability Screen Office was then launched through a collaborative effort led by AMI with the financial support from Telefilm Canada and the Canada Media Fund. The DSO works to build relationships with and foster connections among disabled creatives working and aspiring to work in the screen industry. We influence those working at every stage of content production to remove barriers and create opportunities for disabled creatives. We advocate for policies that support disabled creatives in the screen industry. And of course, we ensure the long-term success of this office for disabled creatives so we can continue to deliver on the above goals. We do all of this by forging partnerships, providing resources, and developing opportunities for disabled creatives through our programs. So today, I would like to tell you a little bit about some of those programs. The first one is a research study called Mapping Representation and Barriers to Participation by People with Disabilities in the Screen-Based Media and Broadcasting Sectors. So, the Disability Screen Office is leading Canada's first ever study on the participation of people with disabilities in the Canadian screen sector and the barriers they face in the labor force. As you've heard some of our colleagues speak about earlier today, we know that 27% of all Canadians are living with at least one disability. However, we don't exactly know how many disabled people are presently working in the screen industry. So, this multi-year project will culminate in a research report and a foundational document, a best practices guide, outlining standards and guidelines for disability representation and inclusion, both on and off screen, and in both the Anglophone and Francophone markets. This project is currently in its second phase, which will map the current state of disability representation across the industry. It will identify barriers and provide recommendations on how to remove them. We're employing various research methods, including a fulsome literature review, consultations and focus groups, and we are about to launch an industry survey, which is going out in the next several weeks. So I really encourage you to follow all of our social media handles and sign up for our e-newsletter so that you can be the first to hear when the survey launches. We are looking to hear about your experience in the sector. We are looking to hear, if you're like me and you're a disabled actor and you have difficulty getting on set because you can't walk up and down stairs. We want to hear about that. We want to hear if you are blind, low vision, and partially sighted, and the accommodations that you may have received in your role that make it easier for you to do your job. We want to hear if you are working in one area of the sector, but there's another area of the sector that you would really, really like to get into, but you haven't been able to because of access barriers. This is going to be foundational data for our sector that hopefully we are going to be able to look back on year after year so that we can see how much we are progressing as a Canadian screen industry. So as mentioned, this survey is going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, and I look forward to sharing more information about that very soon. The second program that I want to chat a little bit with you about is our Industry Resource Hub. So later this year, the DSO will launch the Industry Resource Hub, which is a searchable database featuring a variety of accessibility and disability-related resources, both for established professionals in the industry and new entrants in the Canadian screen industry alike. This is going to be a comprehensive, user-friendly, and accessible platform, which will make it easier than ever to access essential information and support towards your work in accessibility and disability inclusion. Because the Disability Screen Office hears from producers hundreds of times a week, but we are a full-time staff of 4, and we are a completely disability focused staff and a completely disability identified staff. So unfortunately, we don't necessarily have the capacity to respond to every single inquiry for, hey, do you know a wheelchair user who might be able to consult on this project? Hey, do you know an ASL interpreter who might be able to come on board on my film? Hey, do you know of an accessible venue in Halifax? That's where I'm shooting my next project. So enter the hub. It will include listings for accessible venues, accessibility service providers, and other resources designed to make your productions and your workflow more inclusive. It will also include links to other resources, including disability-focused resources that have been produced by our colleagues in the UK, in Australia, and the United States. Users are going to be able to navigate to the hub and search by industry role, service type, disability category, region, province, language, and more. So, for instance, if you happen to be making a project that focuses on the Black Canadian experience, you do probably want a Black ASL interpreter working on that project. You're going to be able to go to the hub and identify a list of ASL interpreters and search by cultural background as well. You will also be able to search by different identity categories. So for instance, if you were searching for me as a disabled actor, you would be able to find me under queer disabled actors. If you are an accessibility professional, accessibility service provider, accessible venue manager, or other business owner with an access-focused product or service that you would like to offer to the industry, or perhaps you're an author of an accessibility-focused resource that you would like to share with the disability community at large, you can submit your product, service, venue, resource, or anything that you would like to share for inclusion in the hub. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can paste this in the chat. It looks like I can only send it to the hosts and panelists, but I do trust that my lovely colleagues at the CBC will be able to share this with the broader group. This is the direct link to the hub submission form. And if you have a category that is not accounted for on this form, but you're thinking, man, I would really love to be a part of the hub. Please feel free to submit any information through this form, and one of our staff members will be in touch with you in the next couple of weeks so that we can be sure that we find the exact right place for you. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me directly as well. I am, as I said, the Director of Programs and Development, and I will make sure that my email makes it to the chat as well. One other thing that I would like to say about the hub is that I did mention that, if you were looking for me as a disabled actor, you would be able to search by identity category. So I do just want to mention that the hub is going to be rolled out in 2 phases. So phase 1 of the hub is going to be accessibility service providers, accessible venues, people who are already providing services to the disability community and are essentially sole proprietors or independent small businesses working with the screen industry. Those are the folks that we are looking to list on the hub as phase 1. We are fully intending to also launch a phase 2 of the hub, which is going to be a database of disabled actors, disabled cast, disabled crew, disabled writers, disabled producers. However, we do understand that there is a great deal of privacy concerns that are associated with having that information be available. So we're taking a page out of the book of some of our colleagues, like our colleagues at ACTRA, who run a lot of really wonderful databases. And ensuring that we are able to appropriately protect everybody's personal and private information. So phase 1 of the hub will certainly be launching this year. Phase 2 of the hub, we will provide an updated timeline as soon as possible, but we're looking forward to getting as many people integrated into the hub as possible. The last thing that I want to say is that the Disability Screen Office has recently launched some new socials. So I would love for you to join us. We do have 2 Instagrams. We have both an English language Instagram and a French language Instagram. Please join us on our English language Instagram at Disability Screen and our French language Instagram at Handicap Écran. And then you can find us on Facebook at the Disability Screen Office, as well as LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I am going to pass it along to Kara from AMI.
Thanks, Alethea. It's really exciting to hear what you and the DSO is doing. I'm Kara Nye, Director of Content Development and Production for AMI TV. I'll just wait for a second for my first slide to, oh, here it comes. On the screen is a large television studio with ceiling lights, cameras, and 2 actors sitting at a desk in front of a blue screen. Text says AMI TV, January 2025, with the AMI black and white logo. For all of you who may not be familiar with who we are, next slide, thank you. AMI is considered a 91H must carry, meaning that we have mandatory carriage on all cable services across the country, so we're in almost 10 million homes. We operate 3 broadcast channels, AMI TV, Ami Télé, which is our French language station, and AMI Audio, which is, as it sounds, our audio-only channel, but on TV. We also have our streaming service, AMI Plus. On AMI TV, we are producing around 90 hours of original content this year, created by and for the 8 million Canadians, as a number of people have mentioned already, with disabilities. And 95% of AMI's TV program schedule is all of our original content, which I think is pretty cool. Next slide, please. To sum up who we are, here's a short video.
Representation in media is important.
There's a lot of people with disabilities that don't feel seen.
I'm a music producer. Having a disability, it's not really shown in the industry.
I make media representing women in wheelchairs.
AMI is a broadcaster that strives to change the way people think about disability.
I'm a very loud and proud deaf woman, and I want to be able to make a difference.
Watch inclusive and accessible content on AMI TV or stream now at amiplus.ca.
It's a pretty good snapshot. And next slide, please. So on screen is the Squeaky Wheel Canada logo with the show name and a large blue wheel with what looks like the blue color dripping off of it. So what have we been up to? Well, last summer we were extremely excited to launch this series based on Stephen Verdeel's website, The Squeaky Wheel, and produced by Hitsby Entertainment. It's a satirical half-hour news format that pokes fun at the ableist society people with disabilities live in every day. As cool and fun as the series is on its own, what really set it apart for us is the production model, and just some examples of how this was produced inclusively 100% of the creative team, writers, cast, directors, and producers, which was 41 in total, were disabled. 100% of the narrative was supervised by disabled people, and they had final creative approval rights. 57 disabled people worked on the series. Production accessibility supervisor was hired from development to delivery, along with a pre-production and production accessibility coordinator. The virtual online writers' room was made accessible with captions, ASL, and a note taker to ensure access for all writers. And there were 4 staff writers, 13 contributing writers, all with different disabilities to maximize the diversity of disabled perspectives. And to accommodate the deaf actor Gatry, they hired an ASL team for the studio shoots, which included 2 ASL interpreters, 1 BASL interpreter, 1 ASL narrator, which was Gatry's voice, and 1 ASL performance coach. And that's just a few examples. They did a lot more. And if we can go to the next slide, I've got a clip from last season. And we'll need the captions on if they don't come on.
Welcome to the Squeaky Wheel Canada. Let's get to the grease.
We're not your average newsroom.
The Halifax Events Committee has added accessible porta potties to all public outdoor events. Or, as able-bodied people see it, finally, another place to
We're not always appropriate.
Just because I need to hire someone to wipe my butt when I go to the can, does that mean I'm not worthy of being a victim of crime?
We deserve to be the subject of true crime documentaries too.
You all realize how problematic that is.
No.
We don't play by the rules.
People with disabilities have always been screwed by the system. Well, the least I can do is make sure they're getting pleasure from it.
Whoopee!
And we want to make noise.
Don't you think it's wrong?
Such an invisible disability thing to say!
Yes!
Whoa.
Stop counting your spoons. This is the Squeaky Wheel Canada.
Remember that the worst disability is having no riz.
It was a lot of fun. It's on AMI Plus if you want to watch it. Thank you for the next slide. On screen is a logo for the Crip Trip in red over top of an old camper van that has Keep Crips Out of Cages spray painted on it with Daniel Ennett, who is a quadruple amputee and wheelchair user and also one of the producers, and his friend and producer Frederick Croach in front of the van. Crip Trip is a new series in production premiering April 11th, throw that in there, that we're hoping is a little edgier than what AMI is used to producing, which is currently a lot of docuseries and lifestyle, which is amazing. Danny and Fred travel through parts of Canada talking to artists like Daniel about the need for systemic change for people with disabilities. Danny's mother is his caregiver and is aging and soon won't be able to take care of him. And right now, the only option for Danny is long-term care. So the series explores that and a whole lot more. On the production side, the producers kicked off production with a survey created and circulated by a consultant from the disability community who ensured that questions were respectful and relevant. Of the 44 cast and crew who completed the survey, 23 or 52% of the team identified as having a disability. Their training plan was amazing. It included 8 mentors and 13 trainees with disabilities. And for production, accessible transit, hotels, and sets were a priority, along with an accessible means of communication. And accessibility isn't one size fits all, so it was extremely important to have the conversation with cast and crew regarding accommodations such as specialized diets, sensory accommodations, pain management, and protection for immunocompromised participants. A couple of the producers' many takeaways, and there were a lot. The best representation in media is always going to be more representation, and to be open to feedback and be prepared to act on that feedback. And if you can go to the next slide, I've got a clip of that as well.
This season on Crip Trip.
I've never really been on a big road trip before.
Yeah, neither have I. This is my first time traveling across North America, and it's incredible.
Greg, get the spray paint.
Dignity for disability.
Party time, bro! Fireworks!
Saskatchewan.
Why are we doing a photo shoot with Aaron in a junkyard? I mean, like, Danny has... Oh. Jesus Christ, what happened?
I'm gonna get you to take my pants and underwear off.
2, yeah. I had no idea caregiving was so demanding. I had no idea.
I'm getting the chance to do a bunch of stuff that I've never done before.
Our next comic is Daniel Ennett.
I'm from Canada. This is just how we all look.
Check it out, photography exhibit.
I think the whole aesthetic of Crib Trip is this kind of like punk rock thing that normally you don't really get to see.
This situation isn't unique to me. The system is cooked, and disabled people are pissed. And I want to meet them.
You made it impossible not to cheat the system.
The keys are in the ignition, and all the doors are locked, and Danny's in there. New York!
Go find a talk dog.
This all started as such a simple idea.
Where are we? What city is this?
Keeping my best friend out of long-term care. But now it's grown into something bigger.
Bam!
Took our rations for the bunker. This is going to be one hell of a ride. Trip trip.
We're really excited about that one. So all of the content we create, again, April 11th, all of the content that we create is created with IDV or integrated described video. It's a production process developed by AMI to build the accessibility of a series right into the production, rather than after, like DV. It's in the writing and sound design. It's considered in pre-production right through to post. Production companies are trained by and work with our supervisor of media accessibility on how to apply IDV to each project. And she really becomes part of the production team. And when cuts come in, her notes are included with the production executives and must be addressed. Spirit of IDV is to create seamlessly accessible content as part of the production, not an afterthought. The result is one piece of content that reaches all abilities with no secondary audio track, and it's truly an inclusive way to create content. Next slide, please. So just a few comments from you viewers on IDV. It was a natural conversation, full of information, easy for both sighted and non-sighted people to enjoy. Much better than the typical annoying described video where the person talks over the show or movie. And lastly, I really enjoyed the integrated described video experience. It felt it flowed more and the show was easier to understand. Next slide, last one. Pictured are two women in business attire. A woman is sitting in a chair facing another woman, a wheelchair user who is writing on a whiteboard on the wall. Text says paid apprenticeships. So lastly, AMI has a work placement program for both students with disabilities and for persons with a disability who have an interest in content creation and broadcasting. Since 2016, we have had almost 30 interns and apprentices come through the program. 7 have resulted in internal and external hires, and 1 has resulted in now 2, yay, seasons of the series Got Game that they pitched to us as part of the program. And 2 more individuals have pitches that have gone into development, which is really exciting. We're in the process of expanding the program beyond production and into other departments, and you can head over to ami.ca if you're interested in learning more. And that's it for my time. I do encourage everyone to check out AMI Plus for all of our amazing shows, and over to Christine from the National Screen Institute. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Kara. Thanks, everybody. This has been a really insightful first portion of the discussion today. So I'm Christine. I'm the Executive Director of the National Screen Institute. The NSI provides inclusive, customized training and mentoring to support creators that are pursuing careers in the screen industry. We are a school without walls. Our offices are in Winnipeg, but we provide training anywhere in the country that has specific needs in terms of what their communities are looking to develop to bring people into the pipeline of the industry. So we're always very eager and keen to work with people that are trying to pave new pathways into the industry. We really do focus on equity deserving groups and are working very hard to diversify the industry. So as you can see here with this slide, I'm here today to talk about the Disabled Producers Lab that is currently underway at the NSI. This is a program for disabled filmmakers to refine their producing skills with accessibility embedded at every stage of the process. And what this, I'll give you a little bit of an outline of what the program is. I won't go into great detail, but this is the Disabled Producers Lab is a part-time 12-week online program designed as a space for disabled producers to develop their producing skills. We currently have 5 participants that had all submitted applications with a short film script, and they're all creating a production binder featuring script breakdowns, budget, accessibility plans, and refining their pitching practice. So this lab aims to strengthen the skills and knowledge required to be a successful and employable producer that will continue to create pathways within the production industry that lead to an accessible industry and with a very specific focus on really bringing producers with disability to the forefront of the industry. So some of the topics included are pitching and packaging our projects, script to schedule planning, the business aspects of the film, including funding and development, distribution and marketing, production accessibility, and then additionally, each producer that goes through the program is developing a production binder for their own completed short scripts. So they're really ready to take it. It's a sample of what it's like to take a full, complete project to market. So really, it's producer training with a focus on not only the production side, but also how to start really bringing a fully formed product to market. And once we complete this lab, we do have a researcher embedded in the lab. We will be writing a very robust case study on this project and what we learned, what we need to continue to do with this particular project, but how to grow it, but also how to continue. This is certainly not a one-off, is what I mean to say. So we're looking to disseminate this case study with our partners. If we can just go to the next slide, this will give you a sense of some of the partners that we're working with. Women in View conceived of this idea and worked with someone who I'll be talking about next here. But Women in View brought the project to the NSI with one of our co-creators. And from there, we've managed to secure these incredible partners that are helping us change the industry, quite frankly. Next slide, please. So these are our incredible co-leads of the project. I'm sure a lot of you know them. If you don't, I encourage you to look them up immediately and learn more about them. I know that they've worked on some of the projects that have been discussed today, but Ophira Kalof and Michelle Asgarali are the leads of this project. They're absolute powerhouses in the disability community. So Ophira and Michelle are the co-leads of the program. Between the two of them, they have writer, director, actor, showrunner credits in television and the arts. They're engaged in various board work and are very experienced facilitators. They've put immense care into the curriculum design, but they're also aside from the curriculum design, what I've been incredibly impressed about these two women is their ability to be driven by sort of guiding principles, which they mapped out before they ran the program. There's a very deep fundamental value system built into this project, and it's really helps, I think, and I believe, to inspire the participants that are going through the program. I think that the care that has gone into this has been quite enormous, and I think that it's overdue. And I think that it's really, really felt in terms of how we're respectfully training and inviting some new people into this industry that have had a very tough time getting their work out there. So thank you. Next, I'll introduce you to our participants on the next slide. I love getting faces out there. I think it's really important for all of us to pay attention to all of our new emerging talent that's coming out there. So these are the 5 participants that are running to the program right now. They're based from all across the country. It's a little bit trouble. I don't know if you can see their names, but mine's a little bit fuzzy right now. But we'll make sure that everyone here receives information about these filmmakers. They're really paving the way. It's the first time we've ever run this program. It's the first time a training like this has happened in North America, this producer-led training for producers, and I think with disabilities. And I think that the next time you see this awesome cohort at a networking event or at a thing, or you're hosting a talk and you see their names, I think it's just really important to introduce ourselves and to do those shout outs, because this is the future, and the future looks quite bright. So thank you. That's all I have for slides. I'll have a few more words to say here and then I'll wrap up. I don't think I feel a full 10 minutes, but I think the thing that I want to impress here is just the amount of work and the commitment that goes into a project like this. When I was preparing this, I was like, oh, on paper, this looks like a pretty kind of standard capacity building workshop. A lot of the familiar timelines and goals that we see when we're doing this kind of work when it comes to training emerging and mid-career talent. But it's much more than that. When you look at these things on paper, it's really, really hard to actually understand the enormous amount of work that goes into this. And I've got to say, when Kara before me was talking about these productions that AMI is running and the amount of work, like I can barely imagine, and I think most of us can barely imagine what it takes to run productions that accommodate and support creators with disability. So I do think this team right now, as they're training and it's a real advocacy effort. This team is breaking barriers while also advocating for access to employment opportunities for themselves and for their community in this sector. Historically, they have not been given mindful access to excel in their talent and in their work, which is a huge disservice to this industry. I see Ophira and Michelle really moving mountains with not only passion, but a staggering amount of patience for all of us. There's definitely moments where our team has really had to sit back and really reflect on and be accountable to what we have not been able to provide to date in terms of accessibility for the filmmakers that come through our program. So it's been a real learning curve for all of us. And again, the patience of Ophira and Michelle does not go unnoticed by our team. I suspect they're a little bit tired, but we've learned, we're adapting, we're relearning new pieces, and we're trying to get there. But all of this hard work with our partners and all of us in this room together that are working to advance creative and skilled people in this industry, it takes a village, and we're all a part of that, I believe. And I think that championing this sort of national narrative and just the full creative, rich depth of ideas and people that we have only makes our voice a lot stronger and a lot more interesting. So I really do believe that this group is doing that. So we're very honored to be running this program. We're very thankful for our partners, and we're always looking to build on what we're doing and make it better. And so always happy to connect with anyone that's interested in talking more about this program or other programs that we offer at the National Screen Institute, because we're here for you. We're here to serve creative minds. So thank you. I hope I didn't talk too fast. It just occurred to me that maybe I did. But thank you, everyone. And I know that at this time we are going to take a quick 7-minute break, stretch, get some water, do some deep breathing, get out a few emails, and we'll see you in about 7 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back from the break. My name is Cassidy Siviero. I am a writer and co-executive producer for the show You're My Hero on CBC Gem. We are here today on behalf of the folks at Long Hope Media, which is the production company behind the show. And I would like to just shout out the showrunner, Kevin Wallace, executive producer, Lucy Stewart, producers, Megan Hood and PJ Wilson, associate producer, Colette Jeffs, and our directors, Kara Haroon and Greg Jeffs, without all of whom this show would not have been possible. We are here talking about season 2 of our show. We were so happy to get a season 2. So thank you so much for Access CBC for this event. And thank you to the folks at CBC Gem for giving us a platform for our show. Our show season 2 is launching on March 14th, 2025 during National Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, where you'll be able to stream both seasons of our show on CBC Gem. To talk about the show, I am going to pass it over to Sean Togud, who is the creator of the show, as well as a writer, co-executive producer, and the show's star.
Thanks, Cassidy. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today. Unfortunately, my camera decided it wasn't going to work today, but that's okay. We pushed through. So I guess we can start with why I wanted to make this show in the first place. I really felt there was a lack of content that spoke to me as a creator with a disability. I often found that it was either inspirational or very emotionally stirring, but it wasn't really authentic to my experience as a teenager and a young adult growing up in my life. So I just wanted to give people a chance to see what it might really be like to live with a disability in a world that's not necessarily designed for people with disabilities. And, our show employs many people with disabilities. And I think that was important for us to not only do it in front of the camera, but also behind the camera as well. And just to create as much of an accessible environment as possible. Maybe Cassidy can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for sharing your experiences. Sean and I have worked together for 5 years now, so we are pretty tight. So it's always warms my heart. It makes me a bit emotional when you talk about the show and your inspiration for creating it. But I will talk about some stuff on the production side that we did in order to make our set more accessible. So one of those things is that we shot all in studio. So that means we were sure that none of our locations were going to have any stairs. We're going to be difficult for anybody with a wheelchair or accessibility issues to access. We had several characters in wheelchairs this season. And also, as part of that, we had during the safety meeting at the top of each day, which is normal in productions, we had a message to keep the hallways clear because we did have wheelchairs, both power chairs and push chairs, like traveling through the hallways a lot. So not only was that in the safety meeting, it was also in the call sheet every single day. Also, we strived not to do too much overtime. The shoot days, as you know, can be extremely long. So we tried not to do any over 11 or 12-hour days. And we also split the show between 2 directors in order to manage the workload. We also got the fortunate opportunity to work a bit with the Disability Screen Office and provide shadowing opportunities to some individuals with disabilities who wanted to shadow either the directors or producers, which was really awesome to get to meet those folks and to have them be a part of the team of our show. Our show has a pretty small crew comparatively to some other shows. But I really feel that kind of tight-knit nature of it was a very good environment for shadowing to occur. We had some really good experiences there. And there are still always going to be some gaps with accessibility. You can't really plan for everything, just like in production in all aspects. We had one situation where the hotel that Sean was staying in didn't give us an accessible room. And then by the time we were able to get the accessible room, it wasn't in the condition that was acceptable. So it's just stuff like that, kind of baking that idea of working through snags in the same way as you would with any other element of production and making sure that you account for that in the budget. As part of the budget, we had a PSW on set for Sean every day. I almost want to put air quotes because although she's an amazing PSW, she's also Sean's mom. Joe Latimer, she's amazing. And so we did, because she's also an actor on the show as well, we were very fortunate that she could be that kind of, I don't know if I'm using this term correctly, like a catch-all kind of person to help us out with that as well. And yeah, I feel like Sean, if you have anything to add, but those are kind of the key things that I am recalling from production, both on season 1 and season 2. I think in season 2, we really hit our stride and it was easier to plan for certain things as well.
I think so. I think that's one of the keys is having done it before we knew what we were gonna face. And I just want to thank the people at AMI and the DSO for also being part of leading the charge in terms of creating content that speaks more authentically to the disabled community, because I think we desperately need it, and I think we it's about time that we started getting a seat at the table of production. So thank you.
Great. So I'll just kind of end off here to say I really hope you'll check out our show. Again, it's launching on March 14th on CBC Gem. And we are just very grateful to have a second season. We have some really cool guest stars and we just had so much fun with it. Everybody was really in the zone after doing it on season 1. So I am going to pass it over to Sarah Kwan, who's going to give a glimpse into Access CBC. Thank you.
Thanks, Cassidy. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kwan. I'm the executive in charge of development for CBC Comedy, and I'm really excited to share with you all of the amazing things that we've been up to with regarding Access CBC. So Access CBC, if you're not familiar, it's this really amazing initiative that we created designed to empower deaf and disabled producers and creators. The main goal with this program was really to provide training and mentorship, financial support on projects in both the scripted, unscripted, and the kids department as well. So this project or this initiative really started back in 2022. That's where we launched the initial pilot season in partnership with Real Abilities. and we got an amazing response. I think we got, I think over 300 applications, which was incredible. The enthusiasm that we felt from creators was really overwhelming and inspiring. And so we had 2 streams that year. So both scripted, which was drama and comedy, and unscripted. And we learned so much during that first season. We learned a lot of really important lessons, but more so we learned how to just access, different parts of this community that we didn't before, that we should have been paying attention to, but also we worked hard to refine the program to make it even better. So we're currently in season 2 right now, and we've leveled up a little bit. We paired officially with the Disability Screen Office, and we're so grateful that they partnered with us, but also they've been such great partners. We added a kids stream to open new opportunities for storytelling, and we also worked with the Creator Network, which allowed emerging creators to produce short form content. So our scripted stream, the one that I'm a part of, shifted to more of a one-on-one mentorship with creative execs for project-specific guidance, and we hosted curated workshops with industry experts to provide a comprehensive view of the industry. So really the goal here in terms of season 2 was to build a more well-rounded experience for our participants. We took a lot of the feedback from the first year, and we really wanted to make sure that each experience felt specifically catered to those projects so that they could be the most successful version of those projects that they could be. So the results have been nothing short of extraordinary. So a few highlights. From season 1, we have Love Lamo, which is a heartfelt short documentary where the creator shares an emotional letter to his late mother, reflecting on his struggles, triumphs, and dreams. Then there's Composer Brain, which is a brilliant short form series by Toronto composer James Lowery. James dives into the magic of modern pop songs, uncovering the music theory that makes them unforgettable. And yes, James is here today, so you are in for a treat. And most recently, we have 4 Hour Attention, which is a project from British Columbia that explores the stories of adults diagnosed with ADHD later in life. So you can check out all of these projects on Access CBC's YouTube playlist. So I believe we'll include a link in the takeaway document so you can look at all of the amazing things that have come out of this program. And I'm really, really excited to announce that Season 3 of Access CBC is coming in spring 2025. We're so grateful that we get to bring this program back and we get to meet and work with more creators in this community. So we're very, very excited to be able to work with people, and please keep an eye on the Access CBC website for updates because you won't want to miss it. And without further ado, I'm thrilled to hand things off to Jackie Lee and James Lowery, who will dive into the magic of Composer Brain. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. My name is Jackie Lee, and I'm the senior producer at CBC's Creator Network. And I'm so thrilled to be here to share some of the work we've been doing with the support of Access CBC. We at Creator Network are looking to be the entry point for emerging creators to work with the CBC, bridging the gap between folks recording in their bedrooms to those pitching from full-scale production companies. I'm joined by James Lowery, the creator behind Composer Brain, the series of shorts, to spotlight how Access CBC has enabled us to produce some great videos together. Let's take a look at James's recent Skater Boy piece for CBC Music. Audrey, when you have a sec, thank you.
Skater Boy, Avril Lavigne's iconic follow-up to Complicated, has a weirdly complicated key structure that mirrors the song's love triangle in a really cool way. He was a boy, she was a girl. The song is built around 2 key areas. The verses are in D major, the chorus is F major. Like the skater and the cheerleader, these keys are quite far apart from each other in musical space. F major is the relative major of D major's tonic minor. It's a mirror of a mirror, like Waluigi. This creates a feeling of a pendulum swinging whenever we move between the verses and the chorus. When we get to the part where Avril swoops in and steals away our punky protagonist, we introduce a 3rd key, D minor. Sorry, girl, but you missed out. Well, tough luck, that boy's mine now. Believe it or not, D minor is the perfect middle point between these 2 other keys. In other words, Avril Lavigne is Luigi, or Wario. whatever turns your crank. Frequently moving between different keys gives our brains a feeling that a musical space is being traveled, like we're going on a little journey, perfect for a story song like this. It also gives the songwriters an expanded set of chords to work with that really makes Skater Boy pop, or punk, or ballet. What more can I say?
Thanks, Audrey. If you like this video, you can watch more of them on CBC Music's YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and TikTok. Okay, so now let's get to know the creator behind the work. Thank you so much for joining us today, James. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello there. I'm coming through okay?
Loud and
Great.
clear.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's James. I'm a composer, performer, and comedian. Currently in the second year of my doctorate at the University of Toronto in composition. On top of all that, I'm navigating kidney failure and the attendant disabilities, which of course is like a full-time job in and of itself. But that's my basics.
Thank you. And so can you tell us a little bit about why you think this work is important? Why you wanted Composer Brain to happen?
Well, I really have a passion for sharing music theory and making it accessible to people. And frankly, from the feedback I've been getting from audiences, people are hungry for this stuff. I think taking, some things that is a little, expert niche and making it accessible to the public in a fun way is something that people really, they love to see from the CBC. There's something kind of old school about it that makes people really want to see more of that. It's not something you would necessarily see from a mainstream outlet. To talk more on the Access CBC angle, I think it's really important to work with disabled creators because, we do come from a place of difference. We have to innovate just to get through the day. So often we have new ideas to work with. So, I think we're good people to be working with.
And can you tell me a little bit more about, I know initially you had kind of pitched some comedy work and you mentioned you're a composer, but how kind of all of your experience has distilled down to this series, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely been really special to be able to pull all from all these different areas of my life. I've been playing guitar forever, composing, in an academic context and also for different ensembles. I went through a whole stand-up phase in my early 20s and have continued on with that, but this has been a real wonderful opportunity for me to distill all these things down into a product that I really think is pretty unique to my own experiences and skill set.
And speaking of experiences, can you share or tell us about your experience making content through Access CBC and working with us?
It's been really good. CBC can be a little intimidating, and Access CBC has really helped me navigate all the different groups and subgroups and who to talk to and who to work with at CBC. And frankly, as someone with a disability, I've really appreciated that there's been no pressure to explicitly make content about that disability, rather to leave that choice up to me. I am excited that I am working on a longer form YouTube video for CBC Music that highlights the way that disabled artists have innovated within the field of music and how our experiences can actually create new musical ideas. But there's never been any pressure to do the disabled thing. And specifically as someone with an invisible disability, the choice of how to express that, but also, all disabled people, invisible or not, have to face that choice. And it feels very good and empowering to not be have my arm twisted into doing disabled content. I think our presence is a contribution in and of itself, whatever we choose to talk about.
And we had obviously we've been in touch before this call, and you mentioned the flexibility in the way that we work together. Can you share a little bit about that with the group?
Well, sure. I think as someone who is disabled, often we don't fit into the traditional 40 hours a week model. And I think Access CBC and the Creator Network has always been very understanding that sometimes disabled people need to work on different schedules. And I've also had the chance to work with other disabled people within the CBC who understand me and get where I'm coming from. So that has all been very helpful.
And shifting more personally, can you share how this work has impacted you?
Well, I've had quite a few opportunities that have come out of this Composer Brain project. I've been called to be a music expert on some CBC radio shows. Maybe my favorite thing is I had the chance to do an hour-long feature on CBC Radio's In Concert about alternate tunings and some composers who are working with notes outside of the usual ones you see on the piano. And as previously mentioned, I'm really excited about this longer form video that does deal more specifically with disability that should be coming out end of February, provided I get off my butt and film the thing.
Thank you so much. Was there anything else you wanted to add, James, to the group, to share with the group?
Well, one of the questions you did ask me was what was one of my favorite moments working with Access CBC so far. And I was thinking about half a year ago, I made a video about Brat, Charlie XCX's Brat, and I barely knew that our videos were going out on TikTok, but this video absolutely blew up on TikTok, which was fun. But the most exciting thing was there was a lot of discussion about the video, even response videos to the video. People were talking about, intention. How do artists understand music theory? Does it inform them? Does it matter if the artists know about the music theory informing them? And where is the line between intuition and all these things? And it was hundreds and hundreds of comments, and it made me so happy that I could just tell there's this hunger for music knowledge. And people know music, and they hear music, and they're like, this is making me feel a certain way. I wonder why that is. And I think that was a really good example of how it is reaching out to people and connecting with them.
I think your passion speaks for itself, which is why I led with the video. And I will say one of my favorite, or an early win, one of your earliest videos was Drake himself commented on it, which was a nice boon. I filed that away, but anyways, thank you.
I also forgot about that till now, but yeah, that was crazy. That was one of my first. That was the first video I shot, and yeah, getting that recognition from Drake was super fun. And I'm just so pleased with the whole project.
Thank you so much for joining us today, James. Next up are Dahlia Thompson and Sarah Duda speaking about accessibility at the Junos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dahlia Thompson, and I'm a manager in unscripted programming, business, and rights at CBC. And I'm delighted to be here today, along with my colleague, Sarah Duda, our content accessibility lead in business and rights, to share some of our learnings on bringing accessibility to a live production at the 53rd Annual Juno Awards held last year at the Scotiabank Arena in Halifax, Nova Scotia. CBC and the Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, CARIS, present the Junos, the Juno Awards event, and the show is produced in partnership with an independent production company, Insight Productions, based in Toronto. The show broadcasts live on CBC, CBC Radio, and CBC Listen across various time zones, in addition to being live streamed on CBC Gem. At last year's show, for the first time, we offered American Sign Language, or ASL, interpretation for audiences streaming on GEM. Sarah will talk a little bit more on the accessibility services after we share a short clip from the Junos of Nelly Furtado singing on stage with one of our ASL interpreters on the right-hand side of the screen. And Audrey, play the roll the video.
Welcome to the Juno Awards. Hosting the party from Halifax tonight, Nelly Furtado.
Okay.
Welcome to the
what a,
we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Audrey.
Okay, great. What a great clip. The Junos is such an exciting event, and as the national public broadcaster, CBC plays a key role in ensuring that everyone has meaningful access to events of national importance like this one. So we were thrilled to offer live ASL interpretation for audiences streaming the show on CBC GEM, in addition to live described video and closed captioning, and making the event accessible to over 3 million deaf and hard of hearing Canadians. In addition to the ASL stream for audiences watching at home, we also offered real-time captioning for audiences attending the event in Halifax. So real-time captions were available for patrons on their personal mobile devices through a QR code system. The QR codes were posted on signage throughout the venue, and an email was also sent out to all ticket holders of the event in advance of the event with the QR code. Next slide, please.
Now we'll just share a little bit on the evolution of this initiative. The idea to offer ASL interpretation and other accessibility services at last year's show began from internal discussions within the programming area and business and rights at CBC. Sarah and myself reached out to the Disability Screen Office to discuss possibilities further, who then submitted an application to the Canada Media Fund through their sector development support strand. The initiative was approved for a very modest amount of funding, which was fantastic, and we began to coordinate planning with Insight Productions. Now, by that time, the Juno Award show production was already in progress with only 3 months to go before the live event on March 24th. This timing presented its own challenges for our new mini production team to make the live event fully inclusive, since milestones such as venue selection, ticket sales, and media launch had already begun. So first, we began to solicit quotes from ASL providers that CBC had worked with in the past to decide on a company given the tight timeline and budget. And in addition to the tight timeline, availability of interpreters was also challenging. There is a very limited number of interpreters with the experience required for live musical interpretation at that time. Given the magnitude of this event and our time pressure, we had to find a company with an excellent skill set and track record that we could also consult with on what we were doing as much as possible, since really this was the first attempt for all of us. Next slide, please. We worked very closely with Insight Productions to get the ASL interpreter teams ready for the big day, and essentially co-produce this initiative with them, which was fantastic, again, because we were all learning and bringing our collective experience to the table, and it was really solid teamwork all the way. We had to get the interpreting teams ready for all of the show elements, which mainly consists of musical performances, but also award presentations, tributes, and performance dialogue. So with Insight's lead, We supplied the interpreters with prep materials such as full scripts for the show, including spoken word, pre-recorded segments and song lyrics, audio tracks for each song, for how they would actually be performed on stage, since the live performance can be a different edit to what we hear on the actual track or radio, rundown or agenda of the live event, and rehearsal opportunities. So before the event and leading up to the full dress rehearsal on the day of the event. We also invited 2 deaf patrons to attend and provided 2 interpreters to interpret the entire in-venue show to them. Our guests later shared valuable information on their experience attending a live music award show like the Junos, and provided expert opinions as audience members, as well as best practices for future events. Next slide, please.
So, and just, can we just have the next slide? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, one back. I was seeing the previous one. Okay, so for this event, ASL interpretation was recorded in a studio backstage in Halifax and broadcast live to audiences at home on CBC Gem. ASL interpreters worked in pairs consisting of 1 hearing interpreter and 1 deaf interpreter. The hearing interpreters were behind the camera, listening to the audio feed and interpreting that into ASL. And the deaf interpreters, who are first language users of ASL, were on camera watching the hearing interpreter's ASL and turning that into a natural first language and providing the most inclusive experience for deaf audiences. For the Junos, we had 3 deaf and 3 hearing interpreters working together to cover the live 2-hour broadcast. And since interpreting is a very physically demanding activity, shout out to the interpreters on this call, the interpreters worked in shifts to ensure that they had time to rest. With respect to framing and presentation of the interpreters on screen, our consultations with the deaf community showed that the vast majority of people prefer a gray backdrop with the interpreters wearing a contrasting color. So for this event, we had a solid gray background behind the interpreters, who were all dressed in dark, solid colors to minimize distraction. We also wanted to ensure that the interpreting team included people who identified as being from diverse communities. For this event, our team represented a range of diverse backgrounds, including an Indigenous interpreter who interpreted a Mi'kmaq Indigenous song performance. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I was muted. As you saw earlier, there are many technical elements to plan for and consider when producing a live telecast show with ASL interpretation for audiences online. And we'll briefly speak to just a few of those today. For our GEM audience, we had a separate signal transmission feed for the ASL interpretation version of the show. And to ensure the safety and security of the ASL interpreters, they were positioned in a controlled environment backstage in close proximity to a designated camera and with limited movement happening around them. In terms of the size of the window for viewing the interpreters on screen, most of the people we had previously consulted with said that 1/3 of the screen allows for optimal viewing, which is the layout we followed, as you saw earlier in the clip we showed. Hearing interpreters wore noise-canceling headsets to minimize distraction in a busy overall backstage environment. And for the live show, there were 2 full technical teams running simultaneously, one on site at the venue and one in the studio at CBC's Toronto Broadcast Center. Next slide, please. Sarah, you're mute. You muted?
Thank you. So just really quickly to wrap things up, we wanted to make sure that we reached as many deaf people as possible in the promotion of the show and making sure everyone knew that ASL was available. So we ensured that we did that in a culturally and linguistically appropriate way by creating ASL promos, which were shared widely across social, including Instagram and TikTok. And this promo was courtesy of Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Service. We also promoted the availability of ASL in all of our press releases for the event, being sure to include links of where people could watch the event on GEM. And finally, we asked our community partners and organizations like Canadian Hearing Services and the DSO to promote to their vast networks as well. Next slide, please.
And we'd like to thank all of our partners in this initiative, starting internally with our production manager, Jody Gantz at CBC. Shout out to Winnie Luck at the Disability Screen Office, Insight Productions, Tracy Galvin and Kim Wheeler, as well as Karis, and Christopher Deloge and the Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Service. And finally, the Canada Media Fund for their generous support in making this happen. So thank you.
Yes, thanks so much to everyone. And this concludes our presentation. And now we are happy to turn things over to Dave Seglins, CBC News journalist and well-being champion, who will talk to us about trauma awareness in journalism. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm going to be speaking, well, about disability, but also inclusion around mental health in certainly a creative field, journalism. A little bit about my story. Back in, well, I've been a journalist for more than 25 years, and I have covered a lot of difficult things. And I gravitated towards the tough stuff as a journalist. And I covered lots of crime. I covered policing. I covered lots of court trials. And often those are cases that deal with tragedy, people who have gone through extreme loss, violence, often suffering, abuse. I've covered cases of pedophiles and murderers and all sorts of ugly stuff like that. And little did I know, or little did our industry really think about how our exposure to these themes and these ideas and these images can have a long-term and lasting impact on our mental health and our safety. And it was in 2010 that I got injured on the job. I was covering a court case involving Russell Williams, who was a Canadian military commander who became a sadomasochistic serial killer, we'll put it that way. And over 4 intense days of covering the court case and his sentencing, I emerged from that unable to get out of bed, unable to move, this terrible sense of dread, and I didn't know what was happening to me. I called the 1-800 employee assistance line that CBC provided, spoke to a counselor there, wasn't terribly helpful, called my doctor. They said, you need to get to a trauma specialist. And I'd never really thought about trauma as being something that could affect journalists or somebody who's working as a professional witness to other people's very difficult stories. But I got to a trauma specialist and explained what I'd been through the last couple of weeks. And she said something miraculous to me. She said, what you're going through is normal. And that was a gift in and of itself, that I wasn't, losing my mind. And I said, what do you mean normal? Because I can't function. I have this sense of dread and this horror going on in my head. And essentially that began my learning around PTSD, about the impact of being exposed to difficult stories, other people's suffering, professional witnesses. And it got me thinking about, well, wait a minute. We don't really talk about this in our newsrooms. How can we have a better conversation? How can we have a better understanding of vicarious trauma and the things that, we have reporters that are constantly covering wars in Ukraine or Middle East, or covering human suffering in natural disasters. How can we have a better sense of how to, number one, understand the impact, but also then take steps to mitigate risk? So allow me to share my screen. I have a small small presentation to show you here. In my work, I proposed at CBC that I not just be a journalist, that I use my experience. Oh, of course, am I going to have a problem with this? This is not, of course, working after we did the whole practice on it. Give me 1 sec here. Okay. There we go. I'm hoping you can see that. Somebody will speak in my ear if you can't see that properly. What it came down to, so I pitched a job to become a well-being champion, meaning I was going to try to enhance the protections and supports inside the newsroom, inside CBC, that will help journalists. And somebody early on in my research around, okay, so what do news organizations around the globe do? Somebody told me early on, the best thing that you can do is create literacy around mental health in workplaces. And that has been the cornerstone of what I've tried to do over the last 4 years, is create educational workshops that explore things like the science and stress of stress and trauma. CBC has supported me in attending a fellowship at the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma. I've taken a course through the Harvard Medical School to learn some of the brain science, and learning about vicarious trauma, about the trauma that witnesses, professional witnesses, and we see this in police officers, we see it in soldiers, we see it in paramedics, jurors, lawyers, judges, those kinds of professions that are trauma facing, the risks of mental health and mental injury, psychological injury from witnessing terrible things. So we started talking about it. We started teaching it to arm people with a little bit of protective knowledge. We also sought some data on mental health, and I was very pleased 2 years ago to be able to launch a Taking Care report. It was a survey of 1,200 media workers to ask them about their mental health. We learned some very interesting things, including rates of anxiety and depression amongst journalists are 3 and 4 times the rates in the public. Also, that 50% of journalists and media workers in this country have sought medical assistance, gone to the doctor for mental health related issues. Found that interesting. It helped open up conversations. And that's really what, raising literacy and dealing with mental health in workplaces, in the creative arts, in journalism, we need to carve out space to understand and talk about our mental health. And then we have to come up with concrete strategies to care for ourselves as individuals, so we know how to better take care of ourselves, and also to support our workplaces. So beyond literacy, this is another plank of what I do as a journalist and well-being champion. We have been developing protocols and practices at CBC. For instance, we have an assignment protocol that we're rolling out across our news service, where we do thinking about, okay, we are going to be covering, let's say, the wildfires in Los Angeles, and we're going to send a couple of crews out there. We're going to do some planning before, during, and after to think about the psychological safety of our people. Managing the trauma load, thinking, okay, what have these team members been doing over the last 3 weeks or 2 months, so that we're not sending people who are already burnt out into the burning fire coverage or that sort of thing. So coming up with practices that will help manage that trauma load. And also thinking critically, what happens if somebody's showing signs that they can't take this next assignment? Or what if somebody puts up their hand and says, you know what, I'm not feeling up to this? Having protocols and practices in place that normalize and make it safe for people to speak up on behalf of their psychological safety. Now, I want to show you one more very quick item. Among the internal supports that we've come up with, counseling for journalists, peer support, we've expanded our medical benefits, we hold workshops for staff on mental health, making things better. But we've also created some external supports through CBC. We've created a toolkit, a not okay toolkit, to help journalists and news professionals when it comes to confronting online harm. We're experimenting with creating a national peer support network across the Canadian news media. And then we have something called the Trauma Aware Journalism toolkit. And this, I think, for the creative audience here today, will be of great interest. This is a collaboration between CBC and the DART Center and the Canadian Journalism Forum on Violence and Trauma. We've done a series of videos. They're educational. I'm going to give you a very quick taste of it before I say goodbye. This is a quick trailer.
Who gets to tell the stories and why?
Stories like this have a life of their own.
Big moral emotions come up.
This is hard now, but in the end, the story is worth that.
You know, we are human beings and we process this emotionally. We're impacted by it.
I learned the hard way about the damage that traumatic events can cause.
I have a sense of when something is emotionally too much and when I can't really do more.
It's really important that we have something else outside of journalism. You need that balance.
That's the only thing that gives permission to colleagues to take care of themselves.
The first thing I tell anybody, regardless of how old they are, is how sorry I am for whatever it is that they've gone through. And I mean that genuinely.
You're asking somebody to relive the worst thing that ever happened to them.
They often have never had a chance to express what's happened and feel heard.
What's been a revelation for me has been the power of storytelling and connection and talking and listening to help heal.
So that is a very quick romp through what we've been doing in CBC News and through journalism. Through the handout that you'll get at the end, traumaawarejournalism.org is where you'll find a whole series of training videos and educational videos. They're designed for newsrooms, they're designed for journalism schools, but they are also very useful for documentary film producers, people who work in the creative arts, video editors, hosts, people who have subject matter that's going to be very difficult. There's lots of food for thought there that would be helpful to consider in terms of how you approach your subjects and how you deal with your staff and your people. So that's it for me. We're going to hand it now quickly to Frankie Fiorini and Mike Evans of CBC's Abila Crew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Evans, senior producer at CBC, neurodivergent, and also co-chair of CBC's Abila Crew.
And I'm Frankie Fiorini. I work with CBC Radio primarily, and I am the other co-chair of Abila Crew, and I have cerebral palsy. I'm going to push it to Mike.
Yeah, we'll wait for our slides to come up here in a second. Perfect. So I guess, what is Abila Crew? Well, we are one of many employee resource groups, and we will tell you in a minute what that actually is, and why there are benefits for both employees and employers. So often, workers are unaware of their coworkers who share similar life experiences or characteristics, and they don't have a space in which to talk and discuss these things. And that's kind of exactly what an ERG is. And it can be benefit to both emotional and mental health for employees. And there are a lot at CBC. Some of them are out CBC, which is one of our kind of largest and oldest ERGs, along with the Abila Crew, Women in Tech, Asian Alliance, and ourselves.
So Abila Crew was formed in 2017, and it was originally formed as a way for employees with visible and invisible disabilities to have a safe space, pardon me, to share their accessibility challenges and needs. So it came about as a way to get to know people who were in similar situations to you, or situations that they could understand that maybe weren't being experienced by your other coworkers or by other people who didn't have this particular the pleasure of experiencing the challenges that come with having a disability. Recently, our friends at Radio Canada started their own ERG for these similar situations called Capacité, Accessibilité, Possibilité, which we usually just call it CAP for short. Next slide, please.
And yeah, that's a big thing about us trying to grow kind of our across the entire country and trying to get people involved from all of our regions. And what an ERG kind of essentially is and how it works is right now, most of them are run by a council of co-chairs, employees who decide on their own time that they're going to step up and take on this role. But every ERG has some degree of kind of autonomy. We get a yearly budget for things like speakers, events, other things that we may want to do to help promote knowledge and awareness. And crucial to the success of our ERGs is an executive sponsor, somebody who within the company can really be a strong advocate for change and for the voice of kind of the employees of the ERG. We'll go on to the next one, Audrey. Thank you.
Okay, so Mike and I wanted to share with you guys some of the impacts that we've had that we can physically see the changes or the changes that are most obvious for us. One other thing that AbiliCrew and other ERGs are great for is raising concerns that members have about things in the workplace. In our instance, some of the biggest ones for us is any physical barriers in our buildings. And AbiliCrew has the lovely honor of being able to advocate for those kind of changes. The beauty of an employee resource group and that effect is it helps kind of keep it to a specific group and allows for them to advocate on behalf of a larger member of people. So for us, one of our biggest accomplishments, at least to our members and team, is the elevator buttons in our Toronto building. They changed the creation of them to have high contrast indicators so that people with visual impairments can see them better. Our accessible washrooms are now labeled all of the ones in our Toronto building specifically, but we are branching out across nationwide. They've been labeled with alternative locations for where you can find the next closest accessible washroom in case something goes wrong with it or there's an issue. Our security portals also in Toronto have been widened to allow people with mobility devices and other things that can need more space to be involved. So one of the other things that we're working with is leveling out our newsrooms and making them accessible for everyone as well. And that's across the entire nation. Those things are important and can be seen. Next slide.
And so not only do these ERGs have impact on the employees themselves and the buildings, but we have actually had impact on CBC and our storytelling. So for instance, we have created a program or helped create within the CBC called CBC AbiliCrew Placements for Excellence, or CAPE for short. And it is an employment program for people with disabilities to be brought in specifically to be trained in different areas at CBC. And no, there's no promise, but some have led to full-time positions for people, or at least continuing positions within. And it's just been a great way to kind of expose both our company and the people involved in CAPE to kind of the media landscape. We also have an on-air development or talent development program that a lot of our disabled creators have come with projects that have now been kind of award-winning stuff, which is great to see. We also just due to the sheer fact that we have a lot of members that cover a large swath of kind of both invisible and visible disabilities. We've become a kind of trusted source within the CBC to consult on different things. And Marketplace, one of their recent episodes called Access Denied, was about the ability to the airline's ability to handle people with disabilities and how they treated them. And we became a consulting group for language and to ensure that they were kind of displayed fairly on air. And that was a very successful collaboration. Next slide, Audrey. But we really can't do this without our executive sponsor, who we're going to thank and move right on to now, Lisa Clarkson.
Oh my gosh, I get to be the rap act. And I'm not going to sing and I'm not going to dance, but as Mike mentioned, I have the great privilege of being the executive sponsor for AbiliCrew, and I'm also responsible for content accessibility, including industry initiatives like this session and also Access CBC. Part of my job as the RAP Act is to summarize what we heard, but we covered so much content from this session, from how you make content more accessible to mental health, to some of the amazing content that's being created by ourselves and with our partners. So, and we're just over the moon to be able to tell you about the green light of Access CBC today. I hope you took one or more than one thing away that you can use right now. I want to thank the speakers who were clever and witty and inspiring. It takes a huge amount of time to present at an event like this, and so we're hugely thankful of the time that they put into what they shared. I also want to thank the team that put this session together. That's Sarah Duda, Karen Clout, Audrey Larty, Natasha Advanti. Thank you. And thanks to our amazing ASL interpreters and captioners. Without all of those people, we would be nowhere. And finally, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to tune in. It was a bit of an experiment. This is the first time we've gathered the industry to talk about content and accessibility. And so we're grateful that you came to this experiment and joined us. There's going to be a treasure trove of information that's going to come your way afterwards. You've heard a reference to the follow-up document throughout, and we really hope that that will be an amazing resource for you and everyone who's registered for this session. It'll come in the next day or so. And if you missed anything, or if you want to share the link, we really hope that you do. We'll also share with you a link to this entire session, which we hope that you share around to anyone that you know who's in the industry. And so I guess I just want to close by saying that now with this learning is our opportunity to try and do things differently. And I hope that you'll take up that challenge and make our industry and our workplaces more inclusive and inspire everyone with what it is that you're doing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. That's the end. That's the wrap.